Welcome to Every Night is Game Night, a proud member of the Dice Tower Network and the home of the Headspace Game Review. We are the podcast that helps you get your head in the game.
Every Night is Game Night, episode 169, Adventuring with Nemo and Coraline. Yo, my peoples, what's up? Welcome back to Every Night is Game Night, the podcast that helps you get your head in the game. I'm your host, Jason. Thank you so much for joining us. Merry Christmas, happy holidays, whatever holiday you celebrate, secular or religious or otherwise. I don't know if there's a third category, but sure. It is the holiday season. I am really pumped up and looking forward to the end of the year. I am looking out at my window right now. We are covered in snow up here in frigid, cold Connecticut, USA. But no matter, I am talking to you about my indoor hobby, which is games. And I have a few of those today, including a product that I'm really excited to share with you. I'm so happy I was able to get these both played and in before the Christmas break, which is next week, Wednesday. If you're looking for that one last stocking stuffer game, it is the adventure games. New from Cosmos. Got a chance to play both of them. Also hit up my friend Paul Grogan over at Gaming Rules. He is very excited about that product as well. Spoiler alert. I know, I always do this. I always just kind of like blurt out whether I like a game or not. What kind of reviewer am I? Nah, it's okay. It's the Christmas season. These are good. If you only listen to the first 5 minutes of this episode, go ahead and grab those off the shelf and stick them in a stocking and give them to a loved one. Play it with your family. I like the adventure games. We also have a couple of reviews for you, other good games, and that'll be the episode. No Kickstarter preview this week. Kickstarter is a little bit barren with the holiday season, which is perfectly fine. We are going to get a ton of good products starting very early next year. So we'll pick the Kickstarter previews right back up when the new year starts. But before we get to the feature review with Mr. Paul Grogan from Gaming Rules, I have a couple of games for you that I enjoy from WizKids. They are very friendly over there. They gave me a couple of review copies, and I tend to enjoy their stuff. They're quirky. One of my favorite games that got no pub is still The Banishing, which we released from them a couple of years ago. They have a ton of games since Zev Schlosinger took over as head of gaming or whatever his title is over there. Lots of sneaky little co-ops, some of which are designed by Andrew Parks, who seems to be kind of an in-house-ish designer over there. And I have two Andrew Parks products for you today. The first one is Coraline, Beware the Other Mother. This one is based very strongly on the movie that came out a couple of years ago, which itself was based on the book by Neil Gaiman. It is a small box hand management puzzle co-op game for 1 to 4 players. You can play this fully solo, or you can have up to 4 players around the table, trying to guide Coraline to escape this nether world of her house, but not her house. I won't go into the entire movie thing. Suffice it to say, you are in a house, which is depicted by tiles. So you have Coraline's bedroom and the garden, the living room, all that kind of thing. And as a player, you are trying to guide Coraline. You don't have your own avatar in the game. You are trying to guide just the central Coraline standee through these areas, trying to find items so that you can eventually escape. You are harried by the beldam, which is the other mother. Why is that the other mother? What happened to her original mother? Well, you're just going to have to watch the movie and find out. So at the table, this is in essence a hand management puzzle. In your turn, whatever player is going to just play a card, and the card can move Coraline around, summon the different characters like YB or Mr. Babinski, who hangs out in the attic, or Miss Spink and Miss Forcible, who are in the basement. So, evocative of the movie right there. You are going to be looking for tokens, which are these face down things that are in each room. You play a card and reveal those items. You play another card on a future turn and put those in your bag. Hopefully you can stay away from the beldam, who is also standing chasing you around, making you drop things and everything. And you can eventually collect all the items you need, play the win card, which is, yes, it is a win card with all the items in hand, and free Coraline from the trap of the other world. All right, Headspace review. Yay! I have some little elbow room over here. I'm on my own. You get the full Headspace review treatment. What are the strategic and thematic headspaces of the game? Theme first. So it's a small game. It's a puzzly game. If you don't really care, you could see right through it. There is no real theme. You're just guiding this standee from room to room, and that's what you're doing. which is fine. It's a small card game. It doesn't need to be dripping in theme. However, if you are a fan of Coraline, and I remember posting on the solo board gamers group, and I think Joachim Erdmann, who is a listener of the show, hi Joachim, was interested in this game because the family likes Coraline, and is it a family weight co-op, of which there are not that many of those, that is worth playing with a family who has seen the movie and would enjoy it. From a theme perspective, it's actually pretty good in the sense that it is a house. You can definitely kind of get the sense of moving Coraline from room to room. The proper characters are there. The way the card play plays out, you have to use the different characters in order to be able to, quote unquote, reveal the tokens. 40 odd cards, there's only 6 cards that reveal items, which is kind of a bottleneck in the game. I'll say more about that in the strategic section. But for theme wise, usually the reveal condition is having one of those characters in the game, which means you have to deal with Miss Spink and Mrs. Forcible. You have to deal with YB and the cat and all that kind of stuff. It's soaked into the narrative flow of the game. And also, I thought the Beldam was great. I'm a big fan of when the big bad in a co-op game is an actual standee who's kind of like chasing you around. I think of a game for Victory Points called Darkest Night, where the Necromancer was chasing you around the board, which I felt was one of the real selling points of the game because it created that kind of sense of tension that's like right there. It's not just an abstract deck of cards. Yes, the Beldam is powered by a deck of cards, but then a lot of the cards will say the Beldam shows up in Coraline's room, makes her drop 2 items. No! Or a lot of conditionals, like if the Beldam is in the room with Coraline, she drops 2 items. Or if the Beldam is not in the room, then she pulls Coraline towards her, and it's just really kind of messes with you. You want to do something, but the stupid Beldam deck gets you in your way. And I thought that it was whimsical, it was funny. That Beldam event deck really kind of added to the sense of whimsy in the game. It isn't just like this bland thing that's denying you resources. It's annoying, it can get in your way at the wrong times. I thought for a abstract, simple card game, for people who watch the movie, there's some stuff there. I'll say that. There's some grist for the imaginative mill, people who like to inject story into their games like I do. You guys know that. Enough of that to liven up this, what would be ordinarily kind of a straight up puzzly card game. All right, strategic headspace. What is the decision space? What is the mental kind of gears that are going when you're playing this game? It's very simple in terms of your action on a turn. You play a card and do whatever. It can be a little bit overwhelming because every card has different text. Every card does something slightly different. All the event cards are a little bit different. All of the action cards are a little bit different. So it's a little bit of a lift. I don't think you can truly give this to like anybody in your family and go. But once you kind of overcome that barrier and get to know the cards, they kind of do the same things. You move Coraline and you get up this type of item, or you look at that type of item, or you interact with this character. That's basically what you're doing with the card play. The biggest thing here is, I mentioned before, that bottleneck. The flow of the game is you have to summon the characters in their proper rooms. You have to reveal the items, which is basically turning it from the black side to its white side. Very simple. And then you collect the items and go. There's a lot of cards that let you collect items. Not a lot of cards that let you reveal items. There's only 6. So the flow of the game is really to kind of set up the board so that when you do pull those cards, you are able to take advantage of them, reveal the item that you need, and then, finish the game. If that gets screwed up somehow, if somehow you take too long in revealing the characters, then you will lose. You do have a mulligan option, so it's not like you're purely at the mercy of the deck. You can take an action and just shove all your cards under the deck and draw new ones to kind of like get through the deck in order to reveal those specific cards, which was definitely its own puzzle. Definitely created a tiered class of cards. Some cards were just there to be discarded, and some cards are these holy things in order to, and once you get them, it's like, oh my god, we got to set ourselves up so we can play these. That's a cool approach to the puzzle. I kind of enjoyed that. My one thought about it is it kind of hurts the replayability a little bit. I understand that playing out, the game can play out in all sorts of different ways, but I definitely, as I played over and over again, I think I got about 10, 12 plays in with different, player counts and everything. The rhythm kind of felt samey. It's like, just overall, I'm setting up so that when I get the reveal cards, I can play them and I can go. I'm done. Once I pull the Forcible and Bink reveal card in the basement, then I can go down there, and it can go in the beginning, it can go in the end, but I'm still setting up my game in order to be able to get that card and play it. Fun, challenging, decisions were cool, cooperation was cool, because if one person has that card, then the rest of the players can just kind of like set the board up so that person can play a card, so the cooperation is there. This game is very, very open to alpha. I happen to think that any game that does not have a personal avatar is more prone to alpha than maybe, those games where you have your own pawn at least. I think of Freedom the Underground Railroad, I think of Robinson Crusoe. Those games can be painful alpha experiences. This one might be no different, but it's a family thing, so you're going to play it with a younger person who, if you're playing a co-op with a younger person, you're kind of alphaing them anyway in this kind of soft, encouraging way, hopefully. I put alpha in scare quotes because not boss them around, but like you're encouraging them. It's like, okay, go here, and this is a good idea and everything. So it's open to that. I wouldn't say this is any kind of feature at Game Night or anything. This is definitely more of a family-oriented product. And the replayability, I don't know about that. I mean, because the game play out so similarly because of the bottleneck of the reveal cards. However, I still have it here. I think what takes it over the line for me is I do like the IP. I like Coraline. I like what they did with the theme. And it's a clever enough card game. And you guys know I love my clever little solo card games. It's a clever enough card game where I really enjoyed it. And I think I'm going to take it out every once in a while and see if my worries about replayability bear out. But it's sticking around for me. Happy to recommend it. This is Coraline, the Other Mother. That one should be releasing soon. It is not in stores quite yet. It should have been by now, but you know how it goes. This one's definitely in stores. This one is Nemo Rising, also by Andrew Parks, also by WizKids. Matthew Catron is the co-designer there. Nemo Rising is more of a classic on-the-board cooperative game in the mode of a pandemic or a forbidden desert or that kind of thing. You are playing Captain Nemo in a steampunk universe. No, you are not hunting whales. You are not in the middle of the ocean. This game has nothing to do with Nemo's War, which is an excellent game from Victory Point Games. This Nemo Rising has nothing to do with it. It's actually based on a novel, another game based on a novel, Nemo Rising by C. Courtney Joyner, which I have not read this novel, but it is apparently a follow-up. All this backstory about Captain Nemo being in jail, and President Ulysses Grant needs him to, follow up and destroy Rober the Conqueror, and I'm sure it all sounds very exciting. This one is definitely kind of a high adventure steampunk. Think of like a BioShock or something in that vein. This one's actually really simple to describe. Another simple family weight-ish co-op. You're on a board. You are running around whatever scenario is set up for you. You can go around the undersea scenario or the Sky City scenario. They kind of play out pretty similarly. Little differences here and there. But you're running around the board and you're uncovering zones. And inside the zones are missions. The missions are modular. You can pick, or you can randomly decide what missions you're going to do. Some of the missions have you just killing all the creatures on the land. Some missions are pick up one thing and deliver it to another thing. There's a little bit of mission scenario. I think half of them are like pick up and deliver, so not quite as much variety as I would want, but it's pretty good. You can kind of mix and match to create different experiences. But yeah, you're taking actions. You're doing pandemic-y type stuff. You're going from one place to another, and you're doing whatever the mission tells you to. Usually some kind of other action in order to activate what you need to activate. Here's the key part of the game. I could almost see the designer saying, I love Pandemic, but I wish it had this. And this is the part of the game that makes it stand out. So every turn, every player is going to have access to a central row of cards. And the central row of cards, you draft one at the beginning of your turn, and it gives you two options for some kind of special power or special buff to one of your basic powers that you can do on your turn. So, do you want to move more? Then take the movement buff. Do you want to guarantee a success at something? Normally, you can try anything that you want. You can open doors, you can reveal tiles, but you might have to roll for it, which means potential for failure. Do you not want to fail? Well, take a card in the specific skill, whether it's brawn or stealth or whatever it is. Take that specific card, do what you need to do. It's almost like if you're playing Pandemic and this turn I want to be the scientist, and I want to do a cure with 4 cards. I take the scientist role, I am that for a round, and then I put it back. Next round, I may need to be the medic that clears off a lot of stuff on the board. I'm going to take that card and be that for a round. It can, in Nemo Rising, it can play out where I'm doing a thing and I'm in a corner of the board where I need to do missions, so therefore I need to select, say, stealth. Lots of ingenuity, which is another skill, because that's what I have in front of me. So I pick that, and then a couple of turns later, I've done the thing, and now I'm surrounded by enemies. And there are enemies, and they're mechanically driven, and they pop out every single round. They have like an AI, simple AI that you run around the board. And now I need to kick butt. And the enemies are kind of a very simple symbol matching thing. And I don't want to roll dice against them. I just want to roll around and kick butt. So I'm going to take that particular card, and I'm going to kick their butts. It's really weird to say how one mechanism can kind of define a game experience like that. But when you're talking about manipulating the action economy, and that's the entire point of a co-op like this, that one mechanism can really make something stand apart. And I think it does so here. So I've already started to talk about kind of strategic headspace. I don't have too much to say about the theme. It's there. There is a theme. It has as much theme as a Forbidden Desert. I mean, it has as much as you want to. I don't have a lot of personal engagement with the steampunk vibe. I don't know the novel. I don't know what's going on. It's cute, and if you are a fan of that kind of motif, then maybe this game has something to offer to you. You're not here for any of that. You're here for a family weight-ish pandemic remix type experience, but that gives you that added turn-by-turn decision space of how can I buff my character in order to accomplish the goal in front of me when I need it the most, which is, sometimes you're in pandemic and you have the same role every single time and it's useless for a round. Like, you're the medic and there's no cubes around, or you're the scientist and you don't have any of the cards you need. You're just kind of basically a basic pawn. You're never that in this game. There's always a card to pull, and there's something for you to do. Adding to the decision space, sometimes you can take a card and it advances this kind of like tracker. So if you take one of the more powerful cards that guarantees successes in a certain skill, it advances the time tracker, which if you run out of time, that's one of the big lose conditions of the game. That and getting killed or running out of time. So generally, you have only X amount of time to run around the board, get your missions done, and then leave. I thought it was fun. Guys, I love Pandemic. I love remixes on Pandemic. I've played like 20 variants of Pandemic and I never get tired of it. This one is pretty solidly kind of in that vein. What I will say is I don't know if it rises above some of the other, like historical pandemics or whatever it is. What a lot of the historical pandemics do is they create different movement puzzles for different games. So like the Rising Tide does the flowing water, and the Rise of Rome has the barbarians. The board play is very interesting, and the interface between the board play and the character is where the juice is at, which I really, really like that. Here, the board play is kind of standard fare. The enemies aren't very, interesting. It's funny to say, the Coraline, the Beldam is actually a little bit more interesting because it's just so direct that it harries you and it gets in your way. Here, you get that kind of zombie feel. It's not a zombie, but that feel like the enemy's just kind of pumping out, and they don't do too much that's different. The juice here is in the actual character manipulation, turn by turn. What do I need now? How can I pick that from what resources do I have available to me now? Do I prioritize movement or do I prioritize another thing? That's where the main strategic headspace is. Those turn by turn, how do I manipulate my character decision? Pretty good, it's solid. Doesn't reinvent the wheel, but it was a rock solid thing. And I think that anybody who really likes to play in that steampunk universe, who wants a different take on Pandemic, might enjoy this. I'm happy to give a solid recommendation, about a 7 out of 10 for me. That's Nemo Rising. All right, without further ado, we are going to get to Mr. Paul Grogan and my conversation that I had with him about the Kosmos adventure games. Those wonderful little things that I'm recommending once again to put in your stocking just before Christmas. Go ahead and yank those off the shelf and have a good storytelling time. So here's me and Paul Grogan talking about the adventure games. I am joined by one of the true legends in the board gaming sphere. He is the man that taught me Gloomhaven and Through the Ages and various other games. He is the patron. He is the overlord of the Gaming Rules channel. He has been on the show before, so welcome back, Mr. Paul Grogan. Welcome to the show again.
Thank you very much for having me on. I'm not sure about legend, maybe legend, but no, thank you for having me on.
If I had to make a Mount Rushmore of content creators, you may just be on it. You may just be on it, my friend. It'd be like Vassal,
cool.
Undead Viking, but it wouldn't be too far before I get to Paul Grogan, my friend.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
So what I have been doing is I have been putting out the call on Twitter whenever I have a game and I don't have any immediate person who I've played it with. I've been putting out the call to other content creators, seeing who else has played. So I put out the call to see who played the adventure games from Cosmos, the mini choose-your-own-adventure style games, but for a little bit of an adult flavor that are in very, very small boxes. So you're going to get a lot of these. Put out the call, and Mr. Grogan has responded. He is going to be publishing a live stream, or by the time this episode posted, live might already be live, with one of his friends. I believe, who's stopping by to chat with you?
Rick. Yeah, Rick, one of my friends, Rick. We're going to do a live show somewhere in the end of December, where we basically talk about all of the different style of escape room games, stroke adventure games, all of this new genre of games. We're going to go through as many as we can because we both love them. We played lots of them, and we want to talk about all of them.
All right. So I'm definitely interested in comparisons to other games, but let's talk about adventure games first, and just kind of like on its own, because it's they stand alone. Cosmos releases the Exit series, which is a series of pretty hard-boiled escape room games. There's not a lot of story. There's not a lot. I mean, there's some vibe and there's some story elements there, but for the most part, it's kind of a delivery system for puzzles. The Adventure series is a little bit different, and we'll get into the how different a little bit later. But just talk about the actual adventure games themselves. So there's two of them. One of them is in the dungeon. It's set in a more medieval area. And one of them is Monochrome Inc., which is kind of a Resident Evil-ish, futuristic corporation type thing. But you're doing kind of the same thing. It's an unfolding story. You start off as characters, and the characters don't have a lot of personality. That's a kind of a role-playing opportunity. You can kind of inject some personality into your characters, which if you have the right, we have the right group, or you with a family, you can really play that up. And you are going through you're going through a storybook, really. So there's a couple of cards, and the cards depict scenes. And the scenes, you'll be able to kind of actually take your mini and place them on the scene and go from location to location to location. So in one card, you might have 5 or 6 locations that are indicated by numbers. And then you'll be going through and figuring out what needs to be done, what needs to be learned. Then you'll consult storybooks. Storybook has a whole bunch of numbers. It looks like a phone book where you're looking up numbers and you're just, whatever the text is, and you can really kind of play that up. And I think, I know there's an app, but I don't know if the app is in English yet.
It is.
Is it?
Yes.
For both adventures,
we'll talk
or for
about
Monochrome?
For both.
Excellent.
I believe we'll talk about that later on because I have strong opinions on the app.
Yes. Yeah.
that are going to be the opposite of what you think when I say I've got strong opinions on the app. But we'll talk about that later on. But yeah, you basically, it is an adventure game is the best way to describe it because that's what it is. You are following through a story. It is an adventure. You have choices to make. You're traveling around different locations and you're interacting with different objects that you're going to be finding.
Yeah, I mean, it's like if you've played those point-and-click adventure games, Grim Fandango or Monkey Island, I mean, it's just like that. You go to a place, and there's a whole bunch of stuff in the room, and you have to go from thing to thing. And like in those adventure games, you're eventually going to find things. You're going to find the hot dog bun, and then later in the board, you're going to find a sausage link. And if you combine those two cards, and you look up whatever that says, you'll have a nice hot dog. And just a kind of a very simple example of what's going on. And then you'll be able to use that hot dog 3 panels later on the dog who is guarding the door, and you give the hot dog to the dog, and then the dog is happy, and then you can open the door. And so that's a very simple example of what can happen, but that's exactly what you're doing here. And it kind of evolves, and it gets a little bit more Easter eggy, so to speak. So
Yeah.
you can really kind of go into the weeds in some of these. Not too far. I mean, this is like a $15 game. So that's the other draw to this, is that you're not going to be spending a whole bunch of money, going through these. So you're not going to. It doesn't go like too far, but there's enough there where if you really, it rewards paying attention. So that kind of bleeds from the description to what I think about it. The best of these games reward paying attention, and when I did the Z-Man games last year, what was it, the Choose Your Own Adventure for Z-Man, which I really think are very close. That's a very close comp.
I've not done any of those.
They're very family friendly. You roll a die for a lot of things, and a lot of random things happen. There was it was kind of an illusion of choice in the Z-Man games. So the Z-Man games, they do that for families, and they're kooky. And I don't want to have to choose my adventure based on the roll of a die. Maybe if I'm with my 5-year-old and he doesn't have any agency when it comes to this stuff. But this is more of a graduated thing where you could really kind of plow through. If you wanted to just do the basic thing, get the kind of skimpiest ending, you could plow through, solve some of the this very, very simple puzzles. Like you don't even solving puzzles at this point. You're just kind of like doing mysteries.
This is it. Going back to what you said earlier on, it's published by Kosmos. Kosmos are the people that publish the Exit games, and these games are in exactly the same size box, I believe.
Yes. Oh yeah, they're definitely meant to be kind of standing next to each other on the shelf.
That's the thing. So, although they are different, and the way you summed it up is exactly right. The escape room games there is a theme, there is a story, but you're not reading tons of narrative. It is focused on the puzzles. Right. The puzzles are challenging. You solve the puzzles, you get the next bit, and you move on.
Right.
These are completely different, but for me, they scratch that same itch as something that I will like to do, a cooperative game with my partner, bit of puzzles, bit of story and everything else. So the fact that they've branded them in the same size box, I think is a deliberate thing, and I think it's right. I think they're gonna appeal to the same type of people, even though, as you say, they are very different styles of games.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the Exit games, so you're going to hear that comparison a lot. And I was talking to Tristan Hall a little while ago, just kind of chatting online. And he was saying he didn't want to play the adventure games because he doesn't like the escape room games. He made that association pretty hard, where it's like, okay, well, this is just an escape room game with a little bit more narrative. Let me pass on these. Hold off on that. This is a very, very different adventure, a very, very different thing. I almost hesitate to call what you're doing puzzle solving. It's more like mystery solving. It's more of you have to kind of think in terms of the narrative. So, it's such a different thing than solving a logic puzzle. So like a logic puzzle is, you have to kind of, mess with letters and numbers, and you have to mess with, and in the Exit games, you're cutting stuff up. So you can actually physically, which is why I kind of prefer Exit to Unlock, because the puzzles are more interesting, because you can cut stuff up and you can, 3D and tactile movement and everything. You're not doing any of that in this game. You're doing what makes sense. Like if you can imagine, I'm thinking about it. I don't want to spoil stuff.
I'm doing the same. I'm trying to think of an example without giving spoilers. Yeah. But let's say you walk into a room and there's a corridor,
right?
And there's a fire burning in the corridor, and you're like, oh no, there's a fire burning in the corridor. What are we going to do? In an escape room game, that would be a puzzle. There'd be a series of letters, there'd be some numbers, there'd be some cryptic things, and you've got to work it out, and you solve a puzzle, press a few buttons, enter a code, and the fire goes out. In this game, you're like, what's a fire?
Right.
Well, where are we going to put that? Well,
and what
is there a fire extinguisher? No, there's no fire extinguisher. Oh, wait a minute. You found a bucket, didn't you? You found a bucket down in the cellar. Yeah, right. And over in that room there, wasn't there a rusty tap on the wall? Well, let's combine the bucket with the tap on the wall, combine those two items together, and it now says, you've now got a bucket filled with water. Now combine the bucket filled with water with the fire in the corridor, and it said the fire's now out. So, yeah, you're right. It's not a logic puzzle like an escape room game, but it is a logical, how are we going to do this, and what are we going to do? Now, touching on what you said earlier on, and I couldn't agree with you more about, you've got to pay attention. We played Monochrome, and we played it over 3 consecutive evenings. No, sorry, we played it over 3 different evenings, and unfortunately they weren't consecutive because of certain situations going on at home. We weren't able to play it, on consecutive nights, and I think it was like 4 days between session 1 and session 2, and we got stuck. We got to a point where we couldn't proceed, we didn't know what to do, and we used the hint system. And again, without giving spoilers away, but using the previous example as an example, the hint system said, don't forget there was the rusty tap in the thing. And we went, rusty tap, water. If we'd have been playing it on consecutive days, we would have probably remembered the narrative said, oh, and there's a rusty tap in the corner. So there is a lot of, reading of text, and there are some things, and I'm using bunny ears here, hidden within the text. They're not really hidden in the text. They are there in the text, but what you might think is just descriptive flavor might actually be useful later on.
Exactly. So I'm glad we're talking because we had very different experiences. I played them solo one night each. So I did one night, I did Monochrome. One night, I did Dungeon. And I was able, fun. It's like reading a book, but better.
Yeah.
I read books all the time. So it's I get, instead of reading this book, I get to play an adventure game. And I was able to remember those narrative cues because they just happened.
Right.
And, I was able to kind of say, oh man, I got this thing. And this lady I met in panel 3 said something about a door. And the lady, I remembered that, okay, so in your example, the fire and the rusty tap and everything. But then I remember this there was a sign back here that said, don't crawl through fireplaces or don't get sooty. So then when I did the thing and I extinguished the fire, and again, we're making this totally up. We're improvising over here.
we should make our own scenario. This sounds fantastic.
But maybe one day we'll do an episode where we just improv our way through a scenario. And that'll be the whole thing. So okay, so we've extinguished the fire, and then it's of course, the thing is open, I'm going to crawl through. But then I get bitten by a spider and I take 2 damage. And it's wait, where did that come from? Oh, hold on a second. Somebody back there warned me. So you might. So I'm thinking of a friend of mine, Jordan Schoenberger, who's on a Dice Tower. He also did these, but he felt like they were kind of random, and he felt like there wasn't a lot of agency. However, if you really pay attention, and that might be hard in a family context where you're just talking to your kid and you're trying to have a good time, but if you really, really pay attention, I think a lot of the stuff, if you take damage, and there's a damage system. It's very, very simple. It's not like it's going to blow away.
There is in the dungeon, but not in Monochrome.
I thought there was a damage system in Monochrome, like you also had.
No, there's the alarm system.
Right. Okay, yes. Some kind of a resource that if you diminish it, then you're gonna mess up your game.
Lose points at the end. Or something.
Then you could actually pay attention to some of these things and avoid certain things. You're not just opening a door for the heck of it. You have to really pay attention. And in order to get the best ending in both of them, you really had to pay attention to the little bit of clues.
Yes.
So this definitely separates itself from the choose your own adventure games from Z-Man and a couple of the other simpler games in this genre by rewarding cleverness, at least if you want the better endings.
Yeah, it's interesting that was it Joni you said? He said that it felt random.
Right.
I think he must have a different definition of the word random to me, because there is literally nothing random in this game. There's no luck factor. There's no random element. You go through door number 17 and you read entry number 17. Everything is totally and utterly deterministic. There's no actual random factor.
Not in terms of
in the game.
I think you're thinking of output randomness, like a die roll, and then something happens differently.
Okay.
But let's say you open door A and door B. It doesn't really matter.
Oh, I see what you mean. Right.
So
it might be good, it might be bad. You don't know at the point of going in.
Exactly. Yeah. At that point of going in, it's I'm just making a random choice and then going through. And sometimes, yes, it's an adventure. If you can't have an adventure that's purely deterministic. That'd be boring. And so there are going to be times where you're at the point of a decision, put door A, door B, you don't know, and it's a random choice which one, and whatever, that'll happen. But that tends to happen early. Once you get to the bottom level of Monochrome, or once you get to the wherever you're doing the big bad, you have enough information to make informed choices if you pay attention, which is what I really appreciated about this game at the end of the day. Plus the fact that it's narrative heavy. The criticism you can have of this game is you have your face in the book all the time in adventure. I didn't mind. I don't know how you felt about that.
Yeah, so question, you played Monochrome in one evening. How long did it take you?
4 hours.
Okay, yeah, that was about our time as well, playing through it, split over 3 sessions. So that's a question I think people are going to have about these games, because they are play once games, really. Is how much gameplay have you got in there? And you've got 3 to 4 hours, I would have said. gameplay
like
in each
4
one.
hours and then like a half hour of thumbing through and figuring out everything else. Like, I think you could say like, oh, you could play it again and get the bet. No. You're going to play it once and then you're going to figure out everything else after you've done it.
Yeah, you're just going to have a look at what would have happened if you'd have opened door B.
Exactly.
So about 4 hours of gameplay, which for, as you say, you're $15, absolutely fine. And you don't destroy any components within this game, so then you can just either sell it on or pass it on to a friend.
Absolutely, as opposed to the Exit series, which you have to cut up.
Except I've played 5 of the Exit series and never destroyed any of the components.
No, you have not. That's a lie.
I have.
That's a lie.
No, it's not. I've done it without physically altering any of the components because I do a games library. And I want people to be able to borrow those games and play them.
But you can't actually do some of those puzzles without cutting the little bars out.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, you can. You just got to improvise, which involves copying it down on a piece of paper and then cutting the piece of paper up. So anyway, let's talk about the narrative.
Yes.
There's a lot. Mm-hmm. There's a lot more than I was expecting. We're not talking Sherlock Holmes consulting detective narrative here, but we're also talking more than your normal game of this genre. There's a lot of narrative, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but for some, I think there might be a bit too much. So just be prepared. There's a lot of reading, or not if you use the app. So you didn't use the app.
No, I did not. I wanted to stay away from the app. We can talk about that.
So here's the thing. I'm friends with Matthew Dunstan, who's one of the designers of this game. I got an early prototype of this game a few months before it came out. Me and my partner sat down, we played it. We played through part 1 of Monochrome. And then I'm going to say the word refused here, refused to play any more and gave it back to Matthew. The reason why is because in the prototype, it was just, a printed document with all the stuff in it. The app wasn't ready. In fact, the app has only just become available. But we enjoyed it so much, but we felt without the app, it didn't work as well for us. And the reason is, everything in the game, and you get this big thick booklet that's absolutely full of narrative, is numbered. Mm-hmm. And what you do in the game is you combine, to combine 2 items together, you take the lower number and put that in front of the higher number. So if you're combining item 12 with location 704, you will turn to entry 12704 in the book and read it.
Right. And
the problem that we were finding is we'd get the little book. Well, it wasn't a little book, it was a printed A4 sheet, but you'd look through it and 12704 wouldn't be there. But you'd see 12705.
Right.
And you can't not see it. You're not reading any of the words, but you are literally looking through a list of numbers, looking for a specific number. So you don't see 12704, but you see 12705. So you close the book, but in your head, you now know that item 12 combines with location 705. We didn't want to have that information. So we stopped playing after the first part, gave it back to Matthew, said, thank you very much. We enjoyed the game so much. We want to save ourselves until the game is actually out. And then the game came out. I got a copy as soon as it came out, and the app wasn't ready. So everybody around the world's playing it and talking about it. And I'm like, I really want to play it, but we're waiting for the app. And as soon as the app became available, we played it, we used the app, and it was brilliant. Absolutely loved it for 2 reasons. 1, it fixes the problem that I just said. So you put in 12704 and it says nothing. You don't get any advanced spoilers of what could be there. The second reason is, as you touched on with the narrative, there's a lot of it. Mm-hmm. And the app and the voiceover, the person they've got to do the voiceover, I thought was really good. You just press the button and it reads it out to you. And you sit there and you feel a little bit more immersed and you're not having to read it out yourself, which, for some groups isn't a problem, but I found the app was really, really well done. So yeah, I strongly recommend the app.
Okay, I'm very glad you broke all that down because for me, I guess this is the kind of gamer that I am. I actually pass on the app because so I totally get what you're saying, and the graphic novel adventures from Van Ryder games, which are also similar games, had a very similar problem of like you're flipping through the book and you're going to spoil yourself with certain things. So you kind of have to train yourself to not pay attention, and it actually is possible to train yourself to kind of narrow some of that stuff down. That's number 1. Number 2, if you're playing, there tends to be one reader. You know,
Yep.
so like it's one person that's doing it, and they just need to keep their trap shut so that everybody else can have a good experience.
But I mean, I'm normally the reader, but then I've spoilt it for myself, and I didn't want to know that item 12 combined with location 705.
Right.
I didn't want to know that.
Right, because you may not have even gotten to 705. You don't even know what that is, but you know to save
Exactly.
item 12 for that thing.
Yeah. And now, to be fair, 12705 might be these items blow up when you take 5 damage. Right, it might be, but generally speaking, they're not. So yeah, the app for me was fantastic. I've not played the dungeon yet. I've only played Monochrome. I played Monochrome and I lent Rick the dungeon. We've now swapped them back. So at some point, possibly this weekend, possibly not this weekend, but I'll be playing the dungeon. It might even be Christmas Day. Yeah, I think that'll be the Christmas Day. Let's go down a dungeon. Now, the other thing that you mentioned earlier on, which I've been asked before, are these games suitable for kids?
Yeah.
And the answer is?
Depends on the kid, but I wouldn't go lower than like tween.
Yeah.
You know, I wouldn't go lower than 10 or 12. You know, at that point, like especially with Monochrome because of the Resident Evil vibe, you know, you're going to get some medical stuff, you know, and that, you know, that Hollywood medical walking through an abandoned, you know, hospital. What you see those things. The dungeon, a little bit more family friendly, but there's still, you know, maybe some rough points here and there. I won't go too much into it. And I appreciated that. I really did. I'm tired of these family things.
But you've got kids, haven't you?
I do, but I have products for them. I could play Animal Upon Animal with them. I could play...
Right, okay.
I could play... I discovered a role-playing game called No Thank You Evil, which is a kid-friendly role-playing game. I mean, there's products out there that are for kids. I definitely appreciated having something for gamers. And I think, like, you know, it's Cosmos. Yes. You know, like the exit games are for gamers. So, like, the adventure games are going to be for gamers as well. I really appreciated that.
Yeah. I mean, we felt the same. Especially on the parts of the adventure that we got stuck on, when we looked up the answer, we was like, oh yeah, it does make sense. Right. And after we were like halfway through, I went into it expecting that this was going to be a fairly lightweight, easy, fun ride. And it was enjoyable, but it was actually a bit more challenging than I expected. And I came out of it going, well, I'm actually glad about that. It was a bit more of a challenge. Right. We had to think a bit more, and it wasn't just, oh, let's just do this for a few hours and then it's all over. It was actually, it was a little meatier, and as you say, it was probably aimed at more of a gamer than not a gamer.
And to be clear, you could plow through and get the terrible ending, and like, you know, set off all the alarms, and you know, get by with 1 health, and you could do that and not put too much effort into it. But if you really wanted to get the most out of it.
Without giving any spoilers away, at the end you are faced with a number of choices, and those choices will give you a different ending. That's, you know, as we touched on earlier on, you're not going to just then replay the entire game to choose a different ending. You're probably just going to go, oh, well, what would have happened if we'd have, you know, locked the gardener in the shed and thrown away the key? You know that sort of thing. Right. So yeah, it's nice that story-wise, there are different choices that you can make when you get to the end. Certainly of Monochrome, as I say, I've not played Dungeon yet, so we'll say. And do you know that there's a third one?
Is there one that's being developed right now? I imagine there's like way more.
It's out.
Is there?
It's out in German.
Okay.
It was at Essen, and there it was, and I looked at it and I went, wait a minute. What's that? Yeah, there is a third one, which is out. I'm actually on BGG right now trying to find information about it, and I can't find information about it. But yeah, there is a third one which is already out in German, which is odd because obviously Matthew Dunstan, Phil Walker-Harding, not German.
Right.
So how is that one out in German unless it's not by them?
Right.
I think they've come up with the system. But yeah, it must be by somebody else, he says, as he's frantically clicking on various things. No, here we go. Adventure games, Die Vulkancell. There you go.
Okay.
It's out.
You're going to have to translate that one. I'm...
Well, I've no idea. That's what it is on BGG. And it is designer Matthew Dunstan and Phil Walker-Harding.
Wow.
But I'm pretty sure they didn't they didn't create this one, because otherwise, why would it be only in German? You slip into the roles of 4 students on a volcanic island who face mysterious events. So yeah, there you go. It's on BGG. It has an entry. People are asking questions about it.
So we're definitely getting more of these sooner rather than later, which is good news. Final review, just in terms of the adventure games themselves, I really enjoyed these. I so much prefer doing this type of thing than an exit game. Exit games are basically piles of logic puzzles to me, which are fine. It scratches a very different itch for me, which, solving puzzles, in terms of the, that kind of like distinction, right brain, left brain, the imaginative part and the purely logical part. Like, exit and unlock and those other games, they have the veneer, the thinnest veneer of theme, but you're really using your logic part of your brain. This one, you're using your imagination to solve things. And they are logical. Like, they don't completely, come out of nowhere, but you really have to think holistically, think in terms of narrative, think in terms of chronology, think in terms of mystery in order to solve, the puzzles that are presented here. So much prefer to do that. So much. I don't mind reading a bunch of stuff. Most of it is useful. There's some dead ends and there's some flavor, but most of it actually contributes to your game experience, the narrative stuff. So a really, really solid package. I definitely recommend Adventure. You enjoyed your limited play. Where'd you come at the end of playing Monochrome?
Yeah, I enjoyed it. The only thing that I have that's different from your opinion on is, for me, they scratch a similar itch to the escape room game. But I totally get what you're saying. They are completely different. They use different parts of the brain. But for me, I've categorized them both in the cooperative games that I will play with my partner that take a few hours to play and they're one play only. So yeah, they fit into that category for me. But as you said earlier on, Tristan Hall has dismissed these games because he doesn't like escape room games. If you've persuaded him to try one of these adventure games, he might love it.
Right.
So yeah, they are different. It's just, for me, I categorize them together as a similar thing.
So let's go. Well, so let's do some comparisons. The first product I wanted to compare adventure games to is Time Stories. So Time Stories for me is a 10 out of 10 game.
Okay.
I loved it. Some of the later modules are a little bit rough for me, but it doesn't injure the original rating. So I loved the Prophecy of Dragons, I loved the Asylum module, and a couple of the earlier modules so much that that's what I'm basing my grade on. And I felt like they're similar products, right? This is a very much more kind of melted down, streamlined, cheaper. So very, very important that you can access these pretty easily. Tradable, these are smaller things. Time Stories delivered a lot of the same kind of let's do mystery type things. Let's pay attention to what came before so that I can do what's here now. Time Stories is bigger. More art, more places to go, bigger deck, bigger story. And that was kind of the difference for me between Time Stories and this game. And the dice rolling, but whatever. I don't dwell too much on the dice rolling of Time Stories. You overcome that.
That was the bit that I was going to focus on.
Okay.
Is Time Stories obviously has combat resolution mechanics where you start rolling dice for combat, skill tests, whatever, and you might fail. Whereas in the adventure games, it is deterministic. If you combine those two items together, you turn to this page in the book, and that will always happen. You don't roll dice to see whether it works or not. And in Time Stories, you can actually fail the scenario just because of bad dice rolls, and then you have to restart it all again, kind of thing. I'm not saying it's bad. I enjoy Time Stories. I enjoy the narrative of it. And there are some people out there who think that Time Stories would be great if they just actually got rid of all of the dice rolls and just made it, you choose this and this happens, and nothing else to it. And obviously Time Stories has the rewinding time and having to go over the same bits again and learn from your mistakes, which I personally quite like, and I know a lot of people don't like. So, yeah.
I felt like they scratched very similar itches. I just felt like the Time Stories thing was bigger and had more. And actually, I mean, like you said before, you can have bad dice rolls and fail a scenario. I don't know if you could fail the whole scenario. I think you just...
Yeah, you can.
You have to... you're probably going to rewind an extra time loop, because
so
of
you
bad
mean,
dice
yes.
rolls. I think,
Yeah.
I think it's possible to get through that whole thing by, no matter what the dice rolls are, it just depends on how many time loops, how much time you quote unquote waste doing it, how many resources you waste. You're gonna get through the scenario. I think you can kind of focus on the individual like kind of failure, maybe string of failures, but overall the system is kind of built to take that and still carry you through, and you're still gonna learn everything. You're not just gonna come to a hard stop. So that's why, and that's the sense in which I say, okay, I'm not too hung up on the dice rolls. But in terms of the size of the story and the prevalence and importance, like the centrality of your narrative experience as opposed to kind of solving puzzles, I think Time Stories does it so amazingly well. But for the points that you raised, I can totally understand why somebody would prefer the adventure games over Time Stories.
Yeah, absolutely.
So then some of the other ones, there's so many. Like you even told me about
There
one.
is.
I didn't even know about it.
Yeah.
Mystery House from Cranio Creation and distributed by Asmodee. I'd never even heard of this one. What is this thing?
So this is, it's a new game. It's just come out. They released it at Gen Con, but it was kind of a limited run for Gen Con, and then they fully released it at Essen. I believe you said earlier on that Asmodee are going to be distributing this in America. So Asmodee are not the publishers of the game, but I think they're doing the distribution of it in America. Mm-hmm. So what it is, it's a fully cooperative game where you are investigating some kind of mystery. It's a cross between the two games that we've just been talking about, the Adventure and the Exit, but it's more like the Exit games. There is a little bit of narrative, but not much, and there are definitely puzzles to solve. The cool thing about this game is the game box that it comes in has holes in the edges. And what you do when you're setting up the scenario is you actually slot in these cards into slots in the top of the box, so that depending on which hole you're looking through from the side will determine what you can see. There is an app that comes with the game, and basically what you do is you look. So I mean, we had this on a Lazy Susan, piled on top of a whole load of boxes on our dining room table. So it was at eye level. And what you do is you literally look through the edges of the box. You look through the holes and you go, okay, I can see, it looks like there's a fireplace in the distance. Oh, and I'll just look over there, and oh, there's something else. And then you'll use the app and you'll say, I'm looking at card D6 and I've seen a fireplace, and it will give you some information. And then as the game goes on, you'll be pulling out these things that you've slotted in. You'll be taking them out. And when you take one out, of course, that will then reveal something else. Mm-hmm. It's very cool because thematically you are physically looking in and trying to see things. And we were using flashlights. I'll say flashlight instead of torch because it's an American podcast. So we were using little handheld flashlights in our phones to provide bright light so we could actually see in. And it had a very cool atmosphere. But again, it took us about an hour and a half to play. It was a story. There was a couple of puzzles to solve in it. It was fully cooperative. And we enjoyed it, and we played it one evening. There's only 2 scenarios out for it at the moment, but there will be more coming out, at various times in the future. So it's another twist on the genre. Mm-hmm. So the people who are making these games are definitely thinking outside the box and coming up with, different ways that they can do things, which is really cool.
That was Mystery House. And you are a person who has played Exit, Unlock, and Escape Tales. So this is more on the escape room end of things. So like Escape Tales is actually my favorite one because it weaves more narrative into the puzzle solving. Escape Tales, a lot of puzzle solving, but the puzzles tend to be smaller and very quick. So you get them out of the way and then you get to the narrative. So that's why I kind of preferred the Escape Tales one, where in some of these other games you can really get stuck for like an hour on one puzzle.
Right.
So just in like kind of general comparisons, favorite, least favorite, how you like to approach these things.
Oh, that's really difficult. I can't.
You can't rank them.
No, I mean, 2 years ago when all we had was Exit and Unlock, I still couldn't decide then which was my favourite, because each one has strengths and weaknesses, and I like both of them. It's a really good decision. Do I prefer the Exit games or do I prefer the adventure games? I'm going to go out on a limb and I'm going to say I prefer the Exit games, because I think I am more of a logic puzzle solver rather than the narrative. And that's not to say that the narrative wasn't good and I didn't enjoy the adventure games, but if you're going to put a life or death situation in front of me and tell me to pick one, it would be the exit games for me.
Like 5 games for Doomsday, right? You can only fit so many games in your car.
Yeah.
You're fitting the exit games or something along those lines.
Am, yes.
Right. Okay. All right.
Sorry, Matthew.
So I mean, I think we've covered everything. I mean, obviously, at the end of the day, positive recommendation for us. Why MMV in terms of the type of person you are? You know, different people will gravitate towards different things. I'm clearly on the more imaginative end, so I'm going to prefer things like the adventure games or graphic novel adventures or time stories. That's kind of my jam in terms of puzzle solving. I can totally see people wanting to kind of pile on the puzzles. My point is, try to separate those two as much as you can and take them and evaluate them on their own merits. And, you know, I think people get into trouble when they say, okay, this adventure game, this is just exit with a lot of words. So no, it's doing something. Please don't try to approach it that way. It's doing something very, very different and approach it on its own terms. I think you'd agree with that.
Yep, definitely. I know it was the same thing with Time Stories. Is the original Time Stories, when it came out, the case that was included in the game was Asylum. There was a puzzle in Asylum, but the rest of the scenarios, there was no escape room style puzzles in any of the other ones.
Right.
And I think that was a misconception, is that a lot of people thought Time Stories was just a series of escape room style puzzles, and it wasn't. It was, as you say, more narrative and choose your own adventure style.
I think that the issue is that we use the word puzzle for using two very different things. Like, you know, if something's like you have to remember the narrative, you have to remember that this person said this and that. It's almost like a different thing than a logic puzzle. So like a mystery puzzle and a logic puzzle, we're using the same word. I almost don't want to use the same word because it kind of takes people in different directions. But anyway, I think we've drilled the point home. Adventure games, thumbs up.
Yes, definitely.
I think we've covered everything, right, my man?
Yeah, I think so.
Where else are you going to go when you talk to your friend on the live stream?
Yeah, it's going to be very similar to what we've talked about here, but of course today the focus was on the adventure games.
Absolutely.
We're going to try and give all of the ones we've played roughly equal coverage, and we're going to spend probably 5 minutes talking about each one, and as I say, just what we like, what we didn't like about it, the strengths and weaknesses, but we're going to do it in a live show as well.
Responding to comments and
people can respond to comments. Of course, there's a 25-second delay to everything that we're saying. So, of course, we've already moved on to the next one while we're still getting comments on the previous one. Cool. That's just the nature of the live shows. That's just how it works out sometimes. But yeah, I think we'll probably aim to do that one day. I'm going to say between Christmas and New Year. Of course, that depends on, Rick's availability and family stuff and things like that. But yeah, it'd be nice to get that done by the end of this year.
And we're talking about live streams that are available on the Gaming Rules YouTube channel. In the little bit of time that we have left, Paul, please advertise your Gaming Rules channel. You have a Patreon that you actively support. You are self-funded and self-employed over there. Every part of your living comes from rulebook writing and providing content for the people. So it's very, very important that we get the word out and have as many people support you as possible. So give the quick pitch. What's available if they go into the Gaming Rules universe?
I do appreciate that. And if you'd have asked me this question 6 months ago, it would be very different from what it is now. because I suddenly got an internet upgrade and now I can do live streaming, which I couldn't do before.
Cool.
And as I mentioned just before we started recording this, I'm doing 7 live streams this week, which is a mixture of solo games, multiplayer games. I did 6 last week. I think I'm doing 5. No, I think I'm doing 7 again next week. Because I'm basically on a bit of a Patreon drive at the moment for the end of the year to basically say, look, this is the type of content that I can make. Please come along if you're interested, support me on Patreon and get more of it. But that's only one of the things that I do on my channel. One of the things that I'm probably best known for, and you mentioned this at the start, is my how to play videos, which are not live streamed at all. They are me properly scripting, properly filming, properly editing an official, a proper how to play video for the game. That's what I do a lot of. You'll find them on the channel as well. And one of the things about the live streams, which confuses a lot of people, is they go, oh, I didn't manage to catch it live. Will this be available later? The way that YouTube live streaming works is as soon as the live stream is finished, that video is on the channel. So it doesn't matter if you can't make any of the live shows. Every single live stream I've done is on the channel right now. So you can go on there and check that out. But yeah, I use the Patreon campaign to basically fund a lot of the stuff I do. I do a lot of sponsored work. So the how to play videos, they are commissioned by the publishers because they take anywhere between 30 and 60 hours to create, so I can't do that just for fun. I also write and edit rulebooks. That is part of my paid work, but the Patreon funds all of the stuff which isn't paid for by publishers, which, as I say, this week is 7 live streams of games.
Mm-hmm. And is that exclusive to Patreon, or can anybody see those live streams, or do you split them?
No. I have a very strong opinion on content, and whilst I know other people put some of their content behind a paywall, and if they want to do that, that's fine. The strong feeling I have is not that that's wrong, is that I don't want to do it.
Okay. Fair.
I want all of my content to be available for everybody at all times. And I know that hurts the Patreon, because if I did put some content behind a paywall, I'd probably get more financial support. But I just don't want to. I want all of my stuff to be available to everybody. So yeah, it's all there. So the YouTube channel is Gaming Rules Videos. And yeah, any of my videos, all of the show notes have a link to the Patreon page, the BGG Guild, Twitter account, and everything else.
Go ahead and support this man. This is Gaming Rules. He is one of the OGs. I've talked a lot about this guy on the podcast. I'll continue to talk about this guy because he is one of the gems in terms of content creation. This is Paul Grogan. It is always a pleasure to talk to you, man. Let's not be strangers. We'll get together next year for some other content.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I'll keep an eye on your Twitter, and if it ever pops up about a game that I want to talk about, then I'll definitely let you know.
Not a euro. You can keep those euros to yourself. All right, take care, my friend.
Cheers, Jason. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Paul Grogan, for taking a little bit of time. He is a busy man over at Gaming Rules. It took about 3 weeks to schedule that. Lots of live streams over there, lots of content. He's doing that Patreon, so he's going to pump out the content. So always happy to get some time to talk with him. And thank you guys for another great year of ENGN. I hope that everybody is enjoying their holiday season. Go ahead and hit up your favorite podcast, your favorite content creator in the spirit of giving. I won't actually go towards my content. I'm going to point you guys to some other folks that I enjoy. One Stop Co-op Shop, obviously. Liz Davison, obviously. Jambalaya Plays Games, obviously. Those guys are very, very dear friends of the show. BGA Podcast as well. Very dear friends of the show. Also, some other folks that are around that I would like to point you guys towards. Netter's Plays. She has been a guest on the show. Doesn't put out a lot of as much content as she did, but she's still floating around there, still posting things. Go ahead and check out her content. Check out James Hudson over at Board Game Spotlight. He is the person behind Druid City Games. He is a great follow. Ross at More Games Please. I love his artwork, and I love that his opinions about artwork and how he takes a stand for the artistic perspective. At least in the content creator sphere. Laura Deming, hilarious, over at the Things Get Dicey YouTube channel. There are so many content creators. I'm forgetting a lot. I'm hoping to have a couple of these people on the podcast. Anybody is welcome. So until next week, go ahead and grab a game off of that shelf, and let's make every night game night. Happy holidays, everybody.